So for the last 2 decades, scientists have basically been giving the Arctic an annual checkup. And well, the 2025 results are in. We're going to dive into this year's Arctic report card and see what it's telling us about the pulse of our planet.
You know, this one sentence from the report, it's really the whole key. It frames everything we're about to talk about. The idea that what happens up there in that vast, seemingly remote place, it doesn't stay there. It's a direct signal of the entire planet's health.
So what's the big headline, the main takeaway? The past year was the single warmest year in the Arctic on record. And those records, they go all the way back to 1900. So we're not talking about just a slightly warmer year here. This is the absolute top of a chart that's been climbing way, way too fast.
And this is where we get to this idea called Arctic amplification. Think of it like this. The whole world has a fever, but the Arctic's temperature is spiking. It's not just warming up with the rest of us, it's warming more than twice as fast. In that gap, it's actually getting wider, especially in the fall and winter. And that has massive consequences for things like sea ice.
And yeah, speaking of sea ice, this next number is just, wow, 95%. Since the 1980s, over 95% of the Arctic's oldest, thickest ice, the really tough, multi-year ice that's supposed to be the permanent foundation of the region, it's just gone. Just let that sink in for a second. The very bedrock of that entire ecosystem is vanishing. And this picture, this really shows you what that 95% number looks like. We're going from the abstract stats to the on-the-ground reality. This isn't some computer model of the future. This is what it's like right now. A fragile, broken landscape that scientists are trying to navigate today.
Okay, so to get our heads around all this, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at what the report calls the fever pitch. Then we'll check the system's vital signs. After that, we'll explore the new reality on land, see what it means for life at the water's edge, and then wrap it all up by talking about why this matters to, well, every single one of us.
All right, first up, the Arctic's fever pitch. The great thing about having 2 decades of these reports is that we get this incredible long-term view of just how fast things are changing.
And this side-by-side comparison really tells the story. Look at this. Since 2006, in the fall and winter, the Arctic is warming more than twice as fast as the rest of the planet. I mean, that's not a small rounding error. That's a huge gap. And it's this supercharged warming that's the engine behind almost all the other changes we're going to see.
Okay, next let's look at the system's vital signs. It's kind of like reading the results from the planet's checkup. What are the key indicators in the air and the oceans telling us about the Arctic's health?
This graphic from the report is a perfect roadmap for this. It shows how everything is linked together. It's like a big web. You pull on one string, like surface temperature, and it affects everything else. Sea ice, how much stuff is growing in the ocean, everything. See right here how losing sea ice is directly connected to the tundra getting greener and the ocean getting warmer? It's all one big, interconnected system, and it is seriously under stress. Okay, here's a term you might not have heard before, but it is so important. Atlantification. What is that? Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. The Atlantic Ocean is basically invading the Arctic. You've got this warmer, saltier water pushing north, and it's completely changing the very nature of the Arctic Ocean. So why should you care? Because this is a total game changer. The Arctic Ocean normally has this protective layer of cold, fresh water on top. Atlantification breaks that down. And when that happens, all this warmer water from the deep ocean can rise up and melt the sea ice from the bottom up. It's like an attack from within. And they found evidence of this happening as far north as the North Pole itself. Wild. Okay, so let's shift our focus from the ocean to the land, because the story there is just as dramatic. We're talking about massive ice sheets shrinking and, get this, rivers literally changing color. So let's look at Greenland. Now, you might see that the ice loss in 2025 was a little less than the recent average and think, oh, good news. But it's still 129 billion tons of ice gone in a single year. The main point here isn't the year-to-year blip, it's the relentless downward trend. That ice loss just keeps going, and all that water is going straight into our oceans, pushing sea levels up around the globe. All right, now for something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, but it's real. The report documents this new phenomenon they're calling rusting rivers. Okay, so you know the permafrost, that ground that's supposed to be frozen solid all year round? Well, as it thaws, it's releasing all this iron and other metals that have been locked away for thousands of years. As soon as that stuff hits the water in the air, it basically rusts, turning these crystal clear Arctic rivers bright, vivid,
orange.
And look, this is way more than just a weird color change. This rusting is poisoning the water. It's wrecking habitats for fish, and it's a direct threat to people and rural communities who depend on these rivers for drinking water and for their food. We're witnessing a complete chemical transformation of the Arctic's lifeblood.
Which leads us right to the front lines. How are all these huge physical changes affecting the animals and the people who actually live there?
Here's another one of those key terms, borealization. It's pretty simple, actually. As the Arctic gets warmer, species that normally live further south, in the boreal or northern forest ecosystems, are just moving in. It's basically an ecological invasion. Southern fish, southern plankton, they're all moving into places that used to be way too cold for them. And this chart from the Bering and Chukchi Seas just lays it out in black and white. The native Arctic species, their populations have dropped by 2/3. Meanwhile, the new arrivals from the south are thriving. The entire food web is being completely rewired in real time. And that has enormous consequences for the seals, the birds, and of course, for the indigenous communities whose culture is built around these ecosystems.
And, the report is really clear on this point. Indigenous knowledge isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely critical. I mean, who knows this environment better than the people who have lived there for centuries? Groups like the Indigenous Sentinels Network are doing this amazing work, blending that deep, traditional knowledge with modern science. It gives us a level of understanding of these changes that we just couldn't get any other way.
Okay, so let's pull it all together. We've seen what's happening in the Arctic. Now let's talk about why it's not just an Arctic problem, it's a global one.
This map just perfectly sums up the scale of what we're talking about, and this is just in a single year. It's not one little thing happening over here. It's a whole cascade of records being broken all across the top of the world. You've got glaciers thinning over in Scandinavia, record-breaking ocean temps in the Kara Sea. It's like the entire dashboard for the Arctic is flashing red.
And that really brings us to the single most important thing to remember from all of this. The Arctic isn't some far-off victim that's just taking the punches. No. It's a key player in the global system we all live in. When its glaciers melt, sea levels rise on coastlines thousands of miles away. When its ocean patterns change, it can mess with weather here in North America and over in Europe. The old saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? Well, what happens in the Arctic definitely doesn't stay in the Arctic.
So here we are, 20 years of these reports, 2 decades of scientists documenting this transformation with more and more urgency. The data couldn't be clearer, and the trends are just undeniable. You could say the Arctic has told us its story, loud and clear. The real question this report leaves hanging in the air is, what are we going to do about it?